Trump's travel ban gets a reprieve in court while the U.S. president shifts foreign policy focus to Syria. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. Saying Syria will pay a heavy price if it launches another chemical weapons attack, U.S. President Donald Trump signals he may be ready to take additional action in the ongoing civil war. Meanwhile, the country's Supreme Court ruled that most of his travel ban can go into effect, at least for now. Joining us to discuss these stories and much more from New York, Tara Kangaloo is an international journalist focusing on the Middle East and North Africa. With us in the studio, Afshin Malavi is a senior fellow at Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. From Las Vegas, Megan Barth is a political commentator and founder of the website ReaganBabe.com. And Gustavo Alegret is a U.S. news director and a political correspondent for Colombia's NTN24. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Tara, let me start with you. Let's talk about this warning from the Trump administration to Syria. The United States says that it has intelligence that the Syrian government is preparing a chemical attack in that country. Firstly, how much credibility can we attach to this claim?
Thank you for having me on the show. I think the first thing I would raise with respect to what we heard out of the Trump administration regarding the intelligence they have on what may be yet another chemical attack is if the United States or if any country with such military might have this power, why is it that they're not preventing it? It's 7 years into this crisis. What we saw in April was not the first chemical attack that took place inside Syria that killed innocent civilians. So if we have the intelligence, then why are we not preventing it? Especially since both the Pentagon and the White House confirmed the intelligence. But of course, both the Assad regime and also Kremlin came out very strongly negating and condemning these accusations and saying that we haven't even seen any investigation out of the April 4th attack. So they're continuing to deny that Assad regime was behind the previous attacks, let alone planning for more.
To Tara's question, Afshin, it's a valid question. Why isn't the government doing something about this, the U.S. government, I mean, if it has this kind of capability?
Well, you know, it's an important question, and I think that, you know, we could also ask the same question about the Obama administration that did clearly draw a red line and then refused to take action. To the Trump administration's credit, they did take action after chemical weapons were used.
Right.
Now, having said that, I think there's a broader issue at play here because President Assad is killing a lot of people with non-chemical weapons, you know, using barrel bombs and the like. And what we're seeing right now is a very dangerous interplay, a spider web of entanglements with U.S. special forces operating on the ground in southern Syria, U.S. planes flying above ground, Russian planes flying above ground, Shiite militias backed by Iran also in southern Syria. We're seeing this dangerous spider web of entanglements, and there's a lot of people saying as ISIS is being squeezed, there's going to be a whole set of new problems in Syria. But I do think that Tara's point is correct, that we should have been taking a more robust policy on Syria from the very beginning.
Right, Afshin, I want you to take a listen to what the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, had to say about this. She had some tough words. Let's watch.
They have seen activities that are similar to preparations of a chemical weapons attack, much like what we saw on April 4th. And I believe that the goal is at this point not just to send Assad a message, but to send Russia and Iran a message that if this happens again, we are putting you on notice. And my hope is that the president's warning will certainly get Russia and Iran to take a second look, and I hope that it will caution Assad from the fact that we don't want to see innocent men, women, and children hurt again.
So I guess the question is, you know, we heard there Nikki Haley say, we're going to put you on notice. We'll pay a heavy price. Right. What does that mean?
Well, what it meant the first time they did it was attacks on an airfield. It didn't mean anything bigger than that. But I think what we've seen lately is we've seen the insertion of U.S. Special Operations Forces in southern Syria. We've seen a more robust ground game in the fight against ISIS and squeezing them in Raqqa. And I think that when it comes to Russia and Iran, I mean, General Mattis has talked about these deconfliction zones. Right. Stay tuned. I'm still not convinced that they're ready to take a tougher line.
Okay, well, let's go to Megan Barth in Las Vegas. And Megan, we hear these warnings from the United States, but do you see some kind of well-thought-out strategy on how they're going to handle the situation in Syria?
So far, I think we've been handling it more on a defensive position, but this is the first time I've seen this administration, along with Nikki Haley, take a more offensive position in that they warned that they had good intelligence of the chemical attack or the preparation thereof. And so I think this harder line with offensive language and warnings shot across the American bow will put Assad and Iran and Russia on notice that we are not going to sit idly by, much like the last 7 years, and the red lines that we draw are not going to be crossed and forgotten.
Gustav, we have heard this criticism before of the United States, that it's very easy for the United States to get involved in a war, but it's very hard to finish that war.
Yeah, but look, there are no proofs, just words. If you read the statement of the White House, it's just words. So we have not seen any evidence of what the president or the Nikki Haley in the United Nations said. So in my opinion, Donald Trump and the U.S. administration is playing a game chess in the Middle East and is sending messages to the Assad regime, message to Syria, and message also to the countries in the region who in the past Donald Trump visited, and especially with Qatar in a very unstable situation in a diplomatic perspective.
Right, and Gustav, something else that's very different here is that Donald Trump has told us many times that when he becomes president, and he's now president, he will not announce what he's going to do in a country. But he's doing that now. He's telling us what he's going to do. He's saying, if you do this, I'm going to do that.
Well, this is a red line, and this is what Donald Trump criticized Barack Obama for saying that and doing nothing. And regarding to what you say, the airstrikes on the airfield in Syria was symbolic. It was just, let me put it that way, it was a show, because actually the following day, that airfield was operating regularly or normally. So in my opinion, it was just a gesture, a movement that the U.S. administration is acting very cautiously, because the situation in Syria is not that easy as sometimes Donald Trump would like to.
Right, okay. Tara, I want to get to another big story that affects the Middle East, but it's a story here in the United States, and that is Trump's travel ban. It affects nationals from 6 Muslim-majority countries. Now, we had several lower courts in the United States that ruled against this ban, but we just had the Supreme Court say that it can go ahead for now while they discuss the constitutionality of those provisions. What kind of message does that send, not just to those 6 Muslim-majority countries, but to the Muslim world in general?
I want to answer that question in twofold. One is obviously the Trump administration has not had a strong image in the Muslim world at large, except Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries that support that country in the latest visit and trip he took to the region. But remember, not all Muslims in the world are saturated in the Gulf. So certainly talking about African countries like Sudan, they are being very critical of this travel ban. So are the other countries. But one other point I want to mention is that what we are seeing out of the Supreme Court right now is not the end of it. Of course, they're going to resume and come back to this and review it meticulously in October. And that means more restrictions, provisions, and perhaps alterations to what we have right now already. And what's important to know is what differentiates what the travel ban right now with what it was before is that it in a way does not not affect the people inside the country in the United States that have come from those 6 nations, people who are on work visa, people who are on student visa, people with green card, and that such document. It affects the people who are living in those countries who already had a difficult time getting visa. So certainly this is not the end of it, but as far as the administration's image among the Muslims around the world, it's not a very positive image. And again, we just had Eid al-Fitr, the end of the month of Ramadan, the holy month in many, of course, Muslim countries, and the administration did not hold the annual iftar dinners that the state and the White House do. So that was very much criticized by not just Muslims in the country, but also those abroad.
Afshin, what did you make of it, the U.S. Supreme Court decision? Because we had lower courts, not one, more than one lower court, rule against the ban.
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court, as I understand it, they basically endorsed this very watered-down version of the ban, right? And they're going to come back to it in October, and I think there's a lot of legal arguments that they can make describing this ban as unconstitutional. But essentially, what we've seen is a watered-down version of the ban, which is essentially still allows people from some of those countries who have family ties here, who have business ties here. Broadly speaking, the ban, in my view, is unconstitutional. Yeah. Broadly speaking, the ban, in my view, is immoral. Having said that, the Supreme Court essentially has endorsed this watered-down version of the ban.
Right. The point of contention here, and I'm going to go to Megan for this. Megan, the point of contention is that this is, well, critics will tell you that this is religious discrimination.
Well, yeah, critics and the Democrats will tell us this is religious discrimination, but it is simply not. If it was religious discrimination, he would ban Muslims from the largest populous Muslim countries. He specifically selected 6 or 7, just like Barack Obama had prior. And these are from countries that are state sponsors of terror, that harbor terrorists, and that seek to do harm on our country. If the president, as commander-in-chief, his primary duty is to protect us from enemies, foreign and domestic. That is his #1 duty and his constitutional duty. We do not have open borders here in the United States. The federal government, under the executive authority of our president, protects those borders. And so he is doing his constitution. Muslim countries that
included. Just remember, all the members of the terrorist plot who attacked the U.S. on September 11 were from Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And Saudi Arabia is not in this list. And tell me one terrorist, convicted terrorist in the U.S. who tried to perform any terrorist attack who belongs to these countries. None of them.
The other thing, Anand, is that, several of these countries have antagonistic relations with the United States, no doubt about it. But you're essentially, previous presidents, including President George W. Bush, would differentiate between the people and governments.
Right.
But what this ban does, it does not differentiate between the people and government. President George W. Bush would always differentiate between the Iranian people and the Iranian government because he knew the Iranian people wanted freedom. They wanted change. And so I think this ban doesn't do any of that.
Right. Megan, aren't these all valid criticisms?
Well, valid based on what constitutional authority are they citing? Any president, as executive,
just the point that
has a duty.
If you are going to stop, if in the interests of security you're going to stop people coming from certain countries, why not Saudi Arabia?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, that's a question that the press, perhaps if they get off the Russia narrative, would ask President Trump that question. But no one's asking him that question. As far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, they have been a long time standing ally of the United States. Now, some can disagree with that arrangement, but that's how it stands. Saudi Arabia has put motions forward to establish one of the first terrorism outfits within their country in order to track terrorism, also defund state sponsors of terror. And I think that these moves, along with other Muslim countries that have joined with Saudi Arabia, is a good thing to attack terror in their own backyard as well as abroad.
Tara, you wanted to say something?
Sure. I think, if we look at facts, again, agreeing with the other guests, that the countries listed on this travel ban have not carried single terrorist acts inside the United States. And I just want to point out too what we witnessed a couple of weeks ago, which was the horrific attack during the baseball practice, the congressional baseball practice, and also what we witnessed last May, a little bit more than a year ago in Orlando. A lot of the shootings and a lot of the sort of attacks or horrible massacres that we are seeing in our country are carried out by American-born individuals, people that are not at all associated in the countries that are listed in this travel ban. So if the United States and in this administration intends to keep our country safe and secure, putting a blanket ban on certain countries because of predominantly political lobbying and political interest is not going to make us any safer.